Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm parent coach, mother of four, and your host, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where you will learn that even for parenting experts like me, there is no such thing as a perfect parent, and that fabulous behavior and amazing relationships are right on the other side of that realization. If you're working your butt off to do right by your kid, honor yourself, and go beyond the BS around you, you are my person, and this podcast is for you. Full disclosure, I'm a sometimes potty talker, and we deal with the challenge of raising kids here. This podcast is for grown-ups, so stick your earbuds in and let's do this. Welcome into another episode of the Enneagram series that I'm doing on the podcast right now. I had planned for today's episode to have moved on from the Enneagram to a new topic, but joke's on everyone. When we think we know what we're doing, the universe laughs, right? So I decided to do a virtual version of the Living Enneagram mini retreat that I'm doing here. At the time of this recording, it's going to be in 2 days on Sunday, April 26th. I am going to be doing a virtual version of that exact curriculum on May 17th. And so in honor of that, I'm going to talk a little bit more and inspire you a little bit more to try to get you to sign up for this retreat. So if you have wanted to do it, but you don't live in Denver, if you have, wanted to do it, but you don't have a free Sunday morning to like actually go somewhere or whatever, it's too complicated, or maybe just that date didn't work for you, now is your chance. And because it's not going to be in person, I was able to shorten the time just a little bit. I still gave us tons of spaciousness to really get into deep conversations and not be rushed and things like that. But, because I don't have to wait for you to go and fill up your plate with brunch or look at what my bathroom looks like, that just cuts out like lots of time right there, right off the bat, without having to change the curriculum at all. So May 17th, you can sign up for this virtual version of the mini retreat you have been hearing me talk about for the last month or so. We're going to keep talking about the Enneagram today, but today I don't have a guest. It's just me, yours truly. And we're going to be talking about some of the deeper dimensions of the Enneagram. We're going to talk a little bit about where the Enneagram came from and what the sort of philosophy behind the Enneagram is, maybe even get into some of that spiritual stuff that we sort of simultaneously feel a draw to explore and a resistance to explore. So stay tuned, check it out, and I can't wait to dive in with you on all of this stuff. So, of course, as always, got to start with my confession for you. And my confession for you, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story that's going to help maybe illustrate this confession for you. So, I have been working with the Enneagram since 2010, maybe. So a long time, maybe 2011. And I have, really done a lot of deep dives on myself, on all the types, all the stuff. A couple of years ago, finally made it official and got certified as an Enneagram coach, learned how to help other people find their types, blah, blah, blue, blue, blue. And I'm never not studying. So at the same time that I'm creating this amazing offering for all y'all, I'm also partaking in an amazing offering from someone, Russ Hudson, who is one of the main authors of the sort of Enneagram Bible, that some people would call it that, I suppose, the Wisdom of the Enneagram. He has his own institute, and I'm taking a course through him right now and work with my own, actually 2 different Enneagram practitioners. So I'm always learning and I'm always exploring, which that is not the confession. And if you know anything about my Enneagram type, which is the one, it is not even surprising. But my confession for you is that the more I learn, the more I look back on the way that I was supporting people and coaching them and helping them learn their types, and just want to put my head in my hands and hide under a rock. And so just today, in fact, I was meeting with somebody who, I didn't even remember this happened, but I guess several years ago, I mentioned the Enneagram to her, and she went online and looked around, and maybe she took a test or something like that. But she came back to our next session and said, "Oh, I think I'm a 4." And I said, "Are you sure? You're definitely not a 4." And just that, just her telling me, like, "Oh, I know I talked to you about this before, and I said I thought I was a 4, but you said no." I immediately just wanted to burst into flames because that is not cool. First of all, I don't know. Maybe she is a 4, but also that's not how to help somebody on their path to self-discovery. And I'm sure whether you're thinking about this in terms of like how you talk to your friends or your kids or your partner or whatever, there are so many moments where people come to us and we just think we know, and we maybe speak before we think, or we think we're saying the right thing or whatever, and it turns out to be uh, really just shutting someone down or invalidating them, or kind of, I mean, who knows, I might have pushed pause for years on this person's personal development because I just poo-pooed her own concept of who she was as a person. Just terrible. So I think that it gets at something a little bit um esoteric, or maybe something we just don't want to look at very often about personal growth, which is you're really risking oh becoming aware of just how far off the mark you are in a whole new deep way when you undertake stuff like this. And for a lot of people, like, that's just not a fun prospect. Like, we don't want to do that. And so it makes a whole lot of sense why there are tons and tons of people who are just 0% interested in doing the kind of work that I do. And another quick story, like, this is probably several months ago, but I was out doing trivia with some friends and I was talking about therapy, and and I just had like a really amazing therapy session that day, and I was telling them, not the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of my session, but just like how amazing it was. I feel like I really confronted something about myself, and and I was kind of joking, but it was true, where I was just like, I just like ripped myself apart and cried my eyes out. And I always know it's a good therapy session when my glasses have splatter marks from my tears all over them. And which, okay, I'm saying that in a cynical, sarcastic way, but that's really true. Like, that is really what I feel. And it feels really cathartic for me, and it feels exciting, and it feels, I don't know, awakening. And everyone at the table was like, that sounds horrible. And I was like, I love it. And then one girl was like, it just feels like when you go and talk to a therapist, like, you just talk about your feelings, you just make yourself feel really bad. And then, nothing changes or whatever. And I'm like, yeah. So anyway, my point is, if you are listening to me constantly talk about this deep mining of your soul for realizations and clarity and enlightenment, and it just makes you want to cringe and run for your life, I kind of get it, because I'm confronting that all the time. Like, I just had to confront that myself with a client, just an hour ago before I sat down to record this episode. So it's it's all there for us. The learning, it is magical and beautiful, and it opens up a whole new world. And it also really opens your eyes to, like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing? What have I done? And that's real. So, with that reality in mind, I'm still going to talk about what the Enneagram is. So, I kind of always joke, like, whenever you meet somebody who's into the Enneagram, the first thing people ask is like, well, what is it? What is that? I've never heard of that before. And the answer is like, it's so impossible to answer the question. And you're going to see some parallels between that and some of the things that the Enneagram is about is also hard to answer. But the bottom line is, the answer we tend to give is, it's like a personality test, but it isn't really a personality test, and it's way bigger than a personality test, and it goes way beyond that. And it's not about um describing you, but it's about explaining you. You've heard me say that on the podcast. But like, the joke that I always make is like, yeah, we can say all of that stuff. But the bottom line is, almost, I've never met anybody who has engaged with the Enneagram and didn't just go ahead and figure out what their type is first and foremost. So, I mean, for a lot of people, their entryway, their beginning point the trailhead that they follow is to the Enneagram. I think this might be true for everybody. Like I said, I'm maybe not every single person in the world, but everyone I've ever met, their trailhead is engaging with it as if it is a personality test. So if that's where you're at with it, no problem. Figure out your type. Notice what, point on the gram you resonate the most with. Learn about that, and then it's sort of like an invitation to go beyond that, and you can take that invitation and RSVP yes or no, and there's no wrong answer. So I feel like it is true when I still, even now with this acceptance and understanding that everyone kind of starts with the Enneagram as a personality test. Even with that acceptance and acknowledgement, I still can't just say it's a personality test when someone asks me what the Enneagram is. I still haven't come up with my like one word answer to that or one sentence answer to that. But today we're going to kind of go deeper than the level of personality test. So we're going to talk about like the roots and origin of the Enneagram and the philosophy and sort of spiritual invitation of the Enneagram, which once again, you get to RSVP whatever you want to that invitation. So let's kind of talk about the origins and the roots and stuff like this. And this is going to be once again a very like succinct like overview. We're not going to get into all of the life story of all the people who contributed to the Enneagram or like how they came up with it or whatever. Um but a person who sort of like brought the Enneagram to more broader awareness was a guy named George Gurdjieff, who lived back around like the end of like the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s in like in Armenia and Turkey area, although it wasn't called that back then. But he was just because of his background and where he lived and everything, he was exposed to tons of like different sort of like spiritual practices and mystics and philosophers and teachers. And he just was really curious and he was kind of a seeker as a person, and he just really went for it. And he started to just study and learn more and more and more about all of these different philosophies and religions and spiritual practices, including Christianity and the Sufi religion, like all of this really, really interesting stuff. And he kind of started to just synthesize it all into sort of universal teaching. And to learn about these sort of laws of how the universe works, which I'm also not going to go super far into that because it gets really airy fairy, and that's a conversation for another day. But the three sort of universal laws that he really centered his whole kind of teachings around was the law of one, which is pretty easy. That's the universe is one. We're all one. We're all, part of the whole. And the law of three, which this is where I'm not going to go into the laws beyond this, and the law of seven. Definitely not going into that law today. But you can see that the Enneagram is a physical or visual representation of those three laws. The circle is the law of one, the triangle is the law of three, and then the hexad is the law of seven. And so he never really taught the Enneagram as a personality rubric the way we engage with it today. It was really just this image, this sort of hieroglyph that demonstrated the coalescence of those laws. And it also demonstrated the process by which people sort of raise their consciousness or become more enlightened or educated. You kind of start at 9, which is at the top of the Enneagram, and you go around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you're back at 9. And then you start a new sort of cycle of growth. So that would be called like Gurdjieff's Enneagram of process. And the whole reason why it was a big deal and why it sort of got adopted and expanded later on in life is because it was really illustrating two really important things. So Gurdjieff's whole philosophy was that most people spend the rest of their their whole lives. Most human beings are asleep or unconscious to their authentic nature, which he called essence, and which the Enneagram also calls essence. Or sometimes you'll in Enneagram writing you'll see it called your essential nature. Um, and and then he also explored this sort of relationship between the essence of something, not just a person, essence of a phenomenon, essence of a flower, essence of whatever, the weather or something like that. Everything, every phenomenon has like this inner essence and a way that that essence is expressed. And so he sort of explored the relationship between those two things, including the phenomena of personhood. We have an essence and we have a way that our essence is expressed, which would be our personality. So, as we start to explore the relationship between essence and expression, and we start to explore the idea of waking up from our sort of asleep or unconscious state, you can start to see how the Enneagram is a tool that kind of not just illustrates and teaches about these concepts, but sort of invites us and even shepherds us into doing those processes. So you think about like being asleep, think about the things you do in a day, snapping at your partner or doom scrolling or whatever, binging Netflix, going into like TED Talk mode and lecturing your kid about something that you've already told them 1,000 times or repeating yourself, blah, 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 blah. Those we're asleep, 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 asleep. Those are all situations where we are not conscious, we're not present. And your essential nature, your essence would not behave that way. This world is a magical freaking explosion, miraculous, mind blowing miracle every minute of every day. And if we were present to that, if we were truly like acting from essence, we would not be just like checking out or fall or like being sleepwalking through that situation. But most of us are because our essence isn't the thing that's interacting with stuff. It's the shell that we've built around our essence, the expression of our essence, which is personality. And so so you can start to see how, whoa, this is some pretty deep stuff. You can see how it starts to dip its toes into the world of the spiritual realm, as well as some of these more like deep, like psychological areas. And, whether or not you're a spiritual or religious person, we've all had experiences in life that were just mind blowing or just connected us to something beyond this like nuts and bolts, dirt and rock world that we live in. It might be, whatever, running across the finish line after you've trained for months for a marathon, or holding your newborn baby in your arms and looking at their face, or having an incredible orgasm, or meeting your soulmate, or whatever it is. These moments in life where we've experienced essence, we've experienced something that just is like a little spark or tingle that's beyond the here and now, and it's beyond the you know nuts and bolts of everyday terrestrial life. And Gurdjieff, among many other people, really thought that that was a big deal and worth looking into and worth exploring our relationship with that, and eventually came up with this sort of philosophy that not only is that a big deal and it's worth exploring, it's kind of everything. It's sort of the whole point. Like the more awake we are, the more present we are, the more conscious we are, the more that we are in touch with essence, the more that our personality doesn't ever go away, but it's something that it becomes a tool that we can use and engage with instead of something that defines who we are. And it becomes something malleable. It becomes something that we can soften or evolve. All of those things are possible when we have that when we're awake, when we're not sleepwalking anymore. And so that was his whole deal. And that was it. Then later on, Other psychologists and philosophers and stuff in the 60s and 70s started kind of engaging with the Enneagram and adding this sort of like Enneagram of personality to it. So instead of just talking about things in this like broad concept of like you have an essence, you have an expression, let's wake up, let's go around the circle, and that's how we're going to wake up, et cetera, et cetera. It was like, yeah, you have an essence, you have an expression, and your essence is something very specific, a very specific aspect of sort of universal essence. So your essential nature is sort of like your radio dial that's tuned to whatever frequency of the universe. So think back to when you had that experience with essence, some moment that was just like mind-blowing, expansive, took you totally out of the day-to-day realm of whatever, and you were simultaneously super present but super transcendent at the same time. Maybe it was just a walk in the woods or seeing a rainbow or whatever. If you think back to that thing, like essence is something that's really hard to describe. I mean, you're listening to me try to say what is it, and it's impossible to say. It's ineffable. We can't say what it is, but we can say kind of how it is. We can describe it. And it has like all these qualities. So whatever essence is, you can feel that it has power. It's powerful. We could feel that there's like a harmony or a peace that's part of it as well. We can feel that essence is like it's really pure and good and wholesome and immaculate almost. It feels compassionate and connected. It feels valuable. There's value in it and there's impact in it. It feels deep and profound. It's sort of like all knowing and wise. You have this idea of like knowledge and clarity that comes when you're experiencing that. It feels safe. It feels safe and holding you and supporting you. And it feels wonderful. It feels joyful. It feels exciting. It feels interesting. It feels almost like childlike wonder and awe. These are the 9 aspects of essence, and they correspond to the 9 types of the Enneagram. So when all of these psychologists sort of got their mitts on the Enneagram in the 70s and started to create the Enneagram of personality, they really started to parse out like these different aspects of essence and what happens in the personality, in that expression of that essence for each person around all of those little points on the image. So, are you with me so far? Hopefully this is getting exciting for you. So, I'm going to talk about essence even more now. So, while so we've got this like Enneagram image that outlines the process of waking up and becoming conscious, and then later on it also starts to talk about like the 9 aspects, the 9 kinds of construction of expression of essence or whatever. Now let's talk a little bit about what a personality is, because now we're starting to see, okay, how does this work? Okay, so we might use the word personality to describe just kind of like what makes us unique or our habits or whatever. But personality is a very specific thing. It's a psychological structure, it's an actual functional tool that allows us to navigate life on Earth. It protects us, it helps us make sense of the world, it helps us accomplish goals. And when we're not doing very well, if we're unhealthy, our patterns can be really rigid and reactive, and talk about being asleep. We're just knee jerk reacting and overreacting probably, and we're not responding to anything. We're reacting to everything, right? And then the more present and mindful we are, the more we can actually notice those patterns. We don't have to be attached to them, and we get choice and agency about them instead of being at their mercy. um when you think about the personality, it's the functional expression of who we are. So remember, that's that expressing, but it's not the whole of who we are or the core of who we are. The problem with, or the challenge of life, is that we accidentally forget that. We become identified with our personality. We think we are our personality, when really the personality is just a tool, and that's it. So being wrapped up in your personality creates this suffering, this rigidity, and it distances you from essence. That essence that you are before you developed a psychological pattern. It's your life force. It's the true substance of what makes you unique. It feels authentic. It feels all the ways that we just talked about, all those 9 ways. Um, so some people might use the word soul for that. Some people are really freaked out by that word. We don't need to use that word. It doesn't really matter what you want to call it. Um, but the personality develops around essence, and we need it. We need a personality to survive. You don't want to eliminate your personality. So when people talk about like ego death, that's just really not a thing until you actually die, because you can't live on planet earth without your ego. You wouldn't be able to remember your name or how to walk or whatever if you didn't have your ego or you didn't have your personality. But even though we need our personality, we don't want to be ruled by our personality. We want to grow beyond. Not everybody does, but if you're still listening to this podcast, and especially this episode of this podcast, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you have some sort of inner desire to grow beyond the compulsions and automatic patterns that make up your personality. If you want to stop losing your temper at your kid, or you want to stop avoiding your mother, or people pleasing, or stressing out about the future, we have to release the stranglehold that our personality has on us and reconnect to essence. We need to become more present and conscious and aware. And that's what the Enneagram really invites us to do. To understand our personality. That's that part where it's a personality test. Like, oh, this is who I am. Yeah, this is what I do. Oh, I'm not alone. Oh, I do it because of this. That makes total sense. That's the initial invitation of the Enneagram, to understand our personality. And then we can go further. We can go beyond it into connection with essence. And then we can create this beautiful relationship between those two things. So it's this kind of allure of self-discovery. That's why most of us start working with this stuff, because of the test aspect to it, the seeing ourselves aspect to it, the self-fascination aspect of it. It's the allure of that self discovery, and then the possibility for self realization. And think about what realization actually means. It means to like fully embody who you are, to actually to self actualize, to actually become who you are truly. And that is that deeper path that you can follow if you want to, with the Enneagram. So what's a maybe a pithy or maybe cynical way to say this, but I say it all the time, and I've heard lots of other teachers say it too in different ways, is the Enneagram was never meant to tell you who you are. It was meant to help you see how asleep you are. Like as an Enneagram Type 1, for example, I have the perfectionism in part of my personality, but I'm not a perfectionist. That's not who I am. So it'd be really easy. And maybe my 20-year-old self would have said, like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. I'm a perfectionist. I'm this, I'm that. That's who I am. I'm not. I'm not a mom. I'm not a friend. I'm not a wife. I'm not a teacher or a coach. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not a judger. I'm not a rigid black and white thinker. I'm not a person who's never satisfied. Those are all descriptions of the way that I show up in the world, or the roles that I take on in the world, but that's not who I am. I am essence. And being able to understand that and see, oh, my perfectionism is what's keeping me from being connected to essence. Um, and the last thing that I'm going to say about this, which hopefully will land as the mic drop that I hope it will be, is we talked about these 9 aspects of the universe. We talk about, and we'll talk about this at the Living Enneagram, whether you're coming to the in-person event, which is already sold out, or you decide to come to the virtual one on May 17th. We'll talk about this more. But, I had a client just today ask me, like, how do you even develop your personality? Is it like nature? Is it nurture? Blah, 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 blah. And I talked about essence with them. And this person happened to be a 6. And so I said, were born with a unique connection to one aspect of the universe, which is security and support. That's part of what exists in the universe. And that's what your radio dial is tuned to in the universe, is safety and support. But what also happens is that when we come earthside, sometime in our childhood through hard experiences, or just through the fact that like life on earth sucks sometimes. It's hard, it's painful, and some of that hardship and pain is just way too much for a little tiny baby to bear. That happens to everyone. It's not about your parents being shitty parents or anything like that. But because of that, you lose the connection to the thing that you're most attuned to. So this 6 person, their magical attunement is to the support and safety that exists in the world. And they lost it. And then they constructed an entire personality around trying to feel it again. And if you know about the Enneagram, you know that at the point 6, there's this big focus on understanding what's real and true and knowing where you stand in the world. Trust, safety, security, and truth are so important to the 6, and they construct an entire personality around trying to feel those things. But the catch is that a personality constructed to manufacture something can only ever give us the imitation or facsimile of the thing that we're missing. The the real way to actually have that is more about reconnection with the thing you lost than trying to manufacture it anew with your personality. So what are we going to be doing at this Living Enneagram mini retreat? Whether you come in person or you do the virtual one on May 17th, we're going to be learning about the types. Heck yeah, I just told you we start the entryway at personality test. Let's do it and learn about ourselves and make sense of ourselves and all of that stuff. And then we're going to start talking about this stuff. How do I wake up? How do I understand that my patterns and my personality are really just a prison that have been keeping me from reconnecting to the thing that I lost? And what does it feel like to have that connection again? And if we're really, really lucky, you'll get to have a tiny little moment of feeling connection with that little missing piece, and it's going to feel magical. And you can do it all from the comfort of your own house in your PJs if you want to. So sign up for the virtual event. If you're already signed up for the in-person event, I can't wait to see you and give you an in-person hug. And I also can't wait to see who I'm going to get to meet and get to know in my little Zoom room on the 17th of May. Have a great day, everybody, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye. The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.